My name's Tim Miller. I'm a first-year MBA, and it's my pleasure to introduce our next panel, which is Spreadsheet Simplicity at Cloud Scale, presented by Sigma. And presenting today's workshop will be David Porter, Senior Director of Partnerships. Thank you, David.
All right, welcome everybody. Quick show of hands. All right, we got a decent audience here. Quick show of hands. How many of y'all have heard of Sigma before? Anyone? First time for most everyone? Or you've come by our booth yesterday? Okay, cool. This is perfect. So I'm very excited to be up here doing this in person. I joined Sigma about a year ago, and we've been doing these over Zoom. So it's a little bit different actually being able to see everybody's face while I'm doing it. So very excited to be here in person running this. As I said, I'm the Senior Director of Partnerships here at Sigma. And then here with me, we have Georgia Mann over there taking a picture. Hopefully I got my finger in that. She's our Manager of Field Marketing. And we have Kyle Lang, who manages the Northeast, and he is our Sports Industry Lead. As we're walking through everything, Kyle will be kind of like walking around. If anybody needs any help on anything that we're doing, he'll be able to kind of step in and support. What we're going to do here today, we're going to use Sigma. We're going to start to finish build out an interactive workbook on millions of rows of data. So we have a fictional data set. It's about 5 million records that we're going to be working on. It is live. Everything that we do in Sigma is a live connection, so everything that you will see will be live against a Snowflake data warehouse. The data is a mocked-up data set of stadium sales. So you can imagine like all of the hot dog sales for a single season. Since I am from Houston, we use the Houston Astros home season as kind of a basis for all of this. So you'll see what we have going on in there. If you would like to follow along, there is a 14-day free trial that you can start with. sigmacomputing.com/free trial. Sign up for it. It'll be active for 14 days. And you can also get to the hands-on lab that we're going to be doing with this. They're either at the Bitly or it is on the MIT Sloan, the Sports Analytics Conference app and on the webpage there. I will say we are going to move a little bit quick on this to get through today. If you are keeping up, just raise your hand if you do have an issue or have a question. We will I'm going to try to keep everything moving over here on the left, kind of with me, for purposes of anybody who is going to be following along on the video or be able to do it afterwards. You'll be able to see kind of where we're at in the lab and keep track of what we're trying to do with everything. Another quick question for everybody in here, just kind of a persona question. How many of y'all would identify as more of like a data scientist type persona? Okay, a handful there. How many of y'all would say you're more like data engineering? A couple. Analytics engineers? Business analysts or directors or strategy or something along those lines? A little bit more, okay. So kind of a mix of technical, non-technical. We are going to be doing the majority of what we're doing here from the perspective of an end user. So we're going to go towards more along the business analyst line. So what we're going to be looking at is kind of a flattened out dimensional model. So something that has already been kind of prepped for exploratory analytics, for going and asking questions of the data. Sigma does have capabilities around data modeling, around data prep, around some of those aspects of it. But we're not going to necessarily go too deep on that today. If you want to talk to me afterwards about what can you do to make sure that your data is clean and ready to go, I'm more than happy to have that conversation. We're looking at it more from an analytical lens, just by the nature of the conference that we're at today. For anyone who doesn't know Sigma, the quick 2 cents on it. We come from the same venture capital firm in the same incubator that Snowflake came from. So anybody here that is familiar with Snowflake, our founding story starts very similar to that. Just as Mike Spicer pulled the founders of Snowflake out of Oracle, he pulled our founders out of Salesforce and MapR and said, we need to go and we need to build a better BI platform. So a couple of pieces on that. We were built for the cloud. So we're not legacy technology that has been retrofitted to work in the cloud. We were built for the cloud, which means that we are a full SaaS platform. We are always going to be live against your cloud data, and it's going to be instant time to value. You don't have to download anything. You don't have to deploy anything. A couple of pieces and the two main value props that I think anybody should take out of the talk and whenever you're looking at what the tool does and how we are going to build everything up. A couple of things that I want you to kind of think about is, number one, we are trying to build a familiar experience. We're trying to put this in a spot where anybody has the capability of going and getting value out of a cloud data warehouse. And the way that we do that is we've built our UI to mimic the most powerful analytics tool on the planet, which is Excel. So we are looking at this. There's around 1 billion people on the planet that know how to use Excel. They know how to operate in columns and rows. They know how to add a column. They know how to pivot. They know how to do those things. So we are trying to take that knowledge and be familiar for everybody who is going to do that next bit of analysis. You don't have to be a data expert. You don't have to write SQL. You're always going to be able to go add a filter, group your data, get what you want out of your results. Last piece on it, we are uniquely scalable because everything we do is in the cloud and everything is using your cloud data warehouse's compute capabilities. Everything is a full push-down query. Everything is set up to be able to scale with your warehouse. So as well built and as well put together as your warehouse is, Sigma will be just as fast as that cloud data warehouse, just as if you were writing just straight SQL queries to your warehouse. All that in mind, let's go ahead and start on our warehouse build. So, or not on our warehouse build, on our workbook here. So in this lab, if you're following along, you have your free trial up. We're going to start in the Spreadsheet UI. We're going to work within a little bit of data visualization, bar charts, and group tables. We'll show you how you can use lookups, so like a VLOOKUP type capability, but at cloud scale, so on millions of records, being able to do a VLOOKUP from one table to another. We're going to do a couple of visualizations off of child tables, and we'll show you how this whole thing comes together at the end. I'm going to skip the setup on the free trial. If you have that, it should be relatively quick. Go in there, click on it. There's a couple of email prompts about setting it all up. But we're going to go ahead and kick off directly here within a workbook. So whenever you get your free trial, you'll notice that you'll get your vanity URL up here. And as I mentioned, everything is full SaaS. There is never a need to download anything. There's never a need to provision any servers. There's never a need to do any of that. You can set up your connection just as if you were logging into Snowflake, BigQuery, Redshift, Postgres, any of those, and you're off to the races. We're going to start by clicking this Create New button and creating a workbook. And that's going to load. And what's going to be here is this is really your canvas for where you can start and you can build up your full working session. You can have multiple data elements. You can have tables. You can have visualizations, pivot tables. You can put in images. You can put in anything like that. This is a workbook. It's a canvas where you can start fully and go multiple tabs, multiple elements. Everything is all done directly right here. We're going to start by clicking on Create a Table and go into our tables and data sets. For this purposes, everybody will have access to this Sigma sample connection. So if you are there and you click on the Sigma sample connection, what it's going to show you is all of the database, the example database, and then all of the schemas within that database. And so we're going to do everything on this MLB stadium sales data today. If you look at that database, you'll notice this is a dimensional model, facts, stadium sales, the point of sale system. And then it has multiple dimensions. It has where the product, what the product is, what the stand is, ticket holder information, all of those things. We're going to work, as I said, more from the business analyst point of view. So all of this dimensional model has been flattened out into a single table for us that is around 4.5 million rows. It's got 22 columns. I'll tell you this data represents roughly about a gig's worth of data uncompressed. Whenever it goes into Sigma, or not into Sigma, into Snowflake, it winds up being a little over 100 megs worth of data compressed in Snowflake. I know that because I tried to export all of this and do it, make it to where everybody would have access to a data set. And whenever I did, I was like, oh, that's a lot more data than I thought it was. So right around a gig's worth of data that we'll be working on today. If you're here, what you're looking at right now is really just a preview. So if you are in any other IDE, if you're in any other SQL editor, this would be the equivalent of just doing a select star. And it's going to give you a little bit of information about the table. But let's go ahead and get further into our workbook and click Done right here. So what you'll see whenever we pull this up is, again, we're sitting on about 4.5 million rows. We've pulled up our spreadsheet-like UI here. This is our table data element, is what we call it. It's our stadium sales hands-on lab data. Over here on the left is kind of like a control panel, and you'll notice as we add in different data elements and different visualization elements, that control panel is going to change along the way. So I'll talk about what that looks like. But anything that you do over here on the left, you'll see reflected over on the right. So we just move that win-loss column. I'll do that, pull that back. What we're going to do on this is kind of manipulate the data a little bit, do some cleansing on it. But what I want to show you real quick is what's going on in the background. So within Sigma, you can always get to the query history of everything that is happening live against the warehouse. So like I mentioned before, we are just a window into your cloud warehouse, into your cloud data store. So I've clicked on our query history here, and we can look and we can see we have issued a query that all it is really doing is selecting from that base data set with the different columns that have been named nicely for us. And you'll see right there a limit of 1,001. The 1,001 limit is to pull that back. If we come in here and we actually scroll all the way down and get past that 1,001 records, you'll see it loading right there, that little bar at the top. And what it's just done is it's issued another query to go and fetch the rest of the next set of rows. We limit our ingress and egress based off of that, so you can always kind of just we'll only be pulling back the data that we need for the visualization that you need at that point. So we're not going to pull back 1 billion records. We're not going to do any of that. And it's important to recognize that we don't pull this into another server. We don't pull it into another file. It's always right here, ready, live against the cloud warehouse. All right. So within this data, if you look at it, what we have here is we have our sales quantity, we have a unit price, revenue, unit cost, cost of goods sold. What I want to add here is just do a couple of quick things within the data. So I'm going to add a column for my profit. And so the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to click right here on the COGS, my cost of goods sold, the little drop-down arrow, and I'm going to say Add New Column. So that little drop-down arrow will give you a lot of different options for what you can do within a column. It's very similar to working within Excel with like a right-click type interaction. So right here, and one thing to note, if you'll notice the little gray letters and numbers right there, those are hotkeys. So if anybody has worked extensively in Excel, you know that the way to an Excel user's heart is by helping them never have to take their hands off the keyboard. We are working our way towards that. The other way to an Excel user's heart is a pivot table. We have those there. I will use some of the hotkeys here in a little bit, but for this one, let's go ahead and add new column. And what it's going to do is it's going to move my context up into the formula bar, and I can take my revenue column, and you'll see it pop up right there, and I can take my cost of goods sold, and so I'll do my revenue minus my cost of goods sold just directly right there. You can see it interacting very similar to how it does in Excel, where you can see which columns it is that you are referring to. And we'll hit enter, and it's going to pop up, and I can rename this to my revenue. And we haven't added a column to the data. We haven't done any writing back to the warehouse. All that has happened here, if we go and look at that query history, is you can now see that we also have within our query that is being issued, revenue minus cost of goods sold. I won't belabor the point anymore, but what is happening with each of the clicks and what you're doing on this is that it is writing that SQL for you and sending it back. You could copy this SQL statement, move it into your Snowflake instance, and it's going to return the same data set for you. All we are doing is we are writing that SQL real time as we go. Oh, and that should actually be called profit, not revenue. That'll actually help me out. One other thing that I want to do on this, whenever I look at my data here, is we have our season ticket holder key. Now this is like a unique identifier related to the season ticket holder, and the way this data is set up is if it is a null, that means that they are not a season ticket holder. If they are, if it's not null, then that means that they are. So that's helpful, but I want to change this into a flag. I want to be able to say yay or nay, is this person a season ticket holder? So I'm going to add one more column here. And I'm just going to do a very quick formula. What I like about this formula is that it is a combination of what you would do in Excel and what you would do in SQL. So within Sigma, all of our formulas and everything that we are trying to do is we are trying to write it. We have kind of like a Venn diagram overlap of every type of function you can do in Excel, every type of function you can do in SQL, and we're trying to progressively make that circle get overlapping on itself. So in this case, I'm just going to do a quick if statement, and this if statement is just the exact same thing as how you would write it in Excel. I'm going to do is null, which is a little bit more of like a database type function. I'm going to do if is null, that season ticket holder key. I'll close that out, and if it is null, then they are not a season ticket holder. If it is not null, then they are a season ticket holder. And I'll create a flag just real time like that, and I will call that my season ticket holder flag. The last thing on this data before we kind of move on is I have all of these columns that are actually a dollar unit. So I'm going to go ahead and just highlight each of those, and I'm going to go ahead up here in the currency or in the format bar up at the top. I'll click on that, and I will highlight that and turn that into a currency. And the very last thing on it is I'm going to go ahead and rename this table. And I'm going to call this my stadium data base table. Just a quick best practice when working with Sigma, and when it's very similar to a best practice of working within SQL. It's starting with a base data set. It's starting with that and then running your analysis from there. So similar is how you might create CTEs and then do your next level analysis off of the CTE. What we're doing here is we are starting with a base data set that you can then run with. Anything that I do in the base data set will be reflected in all of the child elements that I'm about to create. All right, so from here, we've been just kind of in the spreadsheet-like UI, the columns and rows, the manipulation on that. What I want to do next is I'm going to go ahead and build up a bar chart. So we have our base table here. I'm just going to click right up here on this create child element piece, and I'm going to create a visualization off of it. So if you just click on right there, it's going to pop up, and the visualization will pop up just below. And again, like I mentioned, the control panel over here on the left, now that we are in a chart element, a visualization element, that control panel is going to change versus if we were back in our table element. So over here, we have the ability to kind of pull things in. We have our x-axis, y-axis, et cetera. So we're going to set this up just really quickly. I will grab our product type, and I'm going to put that on my x-axis. On my y-axis, I'm going to add in my revenue. And you'll notice that it's automatically going to do a summation. So it's going to guess for you how would you like to aggregate this data. You can always come in and change it just by clicking the little drop down next to it and seeing that set aggregate that is right there. We could change it to account distinct, first, last, all of that just with a quick little button click. And then for our color on this, I want to grab our product line and just pull that up. And what that's going to do is it's going to segregate within the product what product line we are looking at on each of these, and we can see what the data looks like from there. One last thing to do with this is I want to actually see all of this data kind of broken out by the different stadium levels. So if we are looking at the apparel sales, how is that different in the club level versus the top level? How is the food and the beer sales different in the different levels? So I'm going to come onto this and add a trellis row. And what the trellis allows is a different level of aggregation or a different level of grouping. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to grab our stadium level and pull that up onto our stadium column. And you'll notice it's really the interface here, and what we're trying to work with is that it's drag and drop. It's easy to move things around. You're able to pick things up, drop them over, move them around the way that you want with just a couple of clicks. And all of this, again, is operating on a very large data set that is moving very, very quickly for us. I'm going to rename this just real quick and say this is our product type. Oops, not that. Just by clicking here on the title, we can rename this to our product type sales, rev by stadium level. And what I want to do with this also is I want to move this to a new page. So this little kebab icon, which I didn't know until I started working at Sigma, that the 3 little dots on top of each other are called a kebab icon, and it's now probably one of my favorite things. So this little kebab icon right here, we click on that, and we can click Move to New Page. So Move to Page, New Page, just right there. And very similar to how you might set up an Excel workbook where you have your data set on one page and then you have your analysis, your pivot table, your visualization on the other page. It's a good way to kind of segregate. And as we look at the different personas that will be using this, we can look at that as well. But I'm going to call this my data tab, and I'm going to call this my stadium sales. So now we're going to go back to our base data here. And we're going to start with this, and we're going to build off of this another level of a grouped table. This is one of my favorite things that Sigma can do. And I think just the power of what we're about to see here, if you're used to traditional BI tools, being able to do things across levels of detail, across the different aggregation sets, is very, very important. So I'm going to create a new child element. I'm going to call this a table. And we're going to go ahead and rename this table to Stadium Sales by Product. And again, the creation of the new table is the exact same way. Go up to Create Child Element. Up here, you have the ability to do visualizations, tables, pivot tables, etc. So we're creating this table here. And within this, I want to do a couple of things first to kind of set the stage on it, is I want to add a couple of summaries. So I'm going to come onto my summary right here, click on this, and I'm going to click to add a couple of totals for myself. So I'll click on our revenue, and you can see it's going to do a sum of revenue across the entire table. And I'm going to call this my total revenue. I'm going to add another column with our hotkeys. I'm actually going to add 4 more relatively quickly here. You can see what the calculations are here in the document. But the shift and plus is the hotkey for that. And so right here, I'm going to do our total sales. So I'm going to do a sum of our sales quantity. Sales quantity is how many units were in that sale, so how many units of that product. So in this case, this will tell us our total units sold. I'll do one more for our count distinct of our stadium order number. So the order number is the distinct record for the order. So a count distinct of those will give us the total number of orders that we had. One order can have many items, can have many pieces to it. So that's why we need to use the count distinct in that case. And we'll say call total orders on that one. And then with those 2, or with the 3 summary items that we've done here, we can start to build up a couple of very important KPIs, right? Doesn't really matter if you're talking sports, if you're talking retail CPG, anything that is going to be in a sales position. What we want to know is what is our average order size, both in dollars and units. So I'm going to take that, and I'm going to take my total revenue, so that column that we just calculated, and I'm going to divide that by my total orders. And that will give us our average order size in dollars. I'll do one more right here, and I'll take my total units sold and divide that by my total orders. If I could spell total orders. And that will give us our average order size in units. So really cool to be able to do these type of summary calcs across each other, have them refer to themselves just really in line. And what I'm going to do on this also is I'm just going to reformat that. We'll call that a number, and we'll call both of these whole numbers just to make them a little bit easier to read what we're looking at here. You know, I have a hard time without the commas being able to see what's going on there. So now that we have these summary items on this, we can actually refer to these back in the table. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come into our product type, and on this little drop down, I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to say group column. This is where the tool starts to get really cool to me. So what we've done on this is we've taken that 5 million rows, and we have grouped them by the different products that we have. And if you click and you open up on apparel right here, you can see here are all of the rows related to apparel. So it is giving you a grouped level, and then you can still get down to that lower level of granularity on it. you can still see here's the exact orders that make up everything within apparel. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and see that grouping. I'm going to add my product line there as well. And so what you can do is you can build out as many layers of the groupings as you want, and you can build out a hierarchy here so that you can see all of these things cross level of detail. On this, what I want to do is I want to see a very common thing is for each of my product types, what is my actual revenue on those, and then what percentage of my total am I looking at? So I'm just going to come up here into my groupings, and on this calculation piece, I'm going to add in my revenue, and that's going to give me my sum of revenue at that product type level. So I'll call that product type revenue. And then I'm going to add in one more column here where I take my product type revenue and divide that by my total revenue. And I'm going to swap that to a percent, and we'll call that product type percent of total. So really, really powerful. And what I really like about this is the ability, one, if you were writing SQL, you would have had to have written several CTEs, one to get the top level, another one to get the next level, and then another one where you join them up together, and then you're doing the cross-level calculation on it. If you were doing like in Tableau, it would be a level of detail calculation where you're doing different levels of detail on it and you're calculating it up. Just the ability to do that cross-reference at multiple different levels is a really, really powerful piece of the tool here. And as we look at this as well, we can come down into the product line. We can do the exact same thing where we pull up the revenue in this column, and we call this our product line revenue. And I'm going to just go ahead and add two columns here where we take our product line revenue and divide that by our product type revenue. And we'll call that our product line percent of product type. And we'll add in one more here real quick where that will take our product line revenue and divide that by our total revenue. And we'll get our product line percent of total. Oops. And then let's go ahead and reformat both of these. Last thing I want to show on this real quick is we can also do some conditional formatting on this piece. We can maybe put it into like a data bars thing, and you can see just really in line, what does that look like, kind of like a bullet chart type thing where it's there, and you can see what the percentages look like. You can always add different types of conditional formatting along the way as you're putting all of these things together. All right, let's go ahead and move this over, again, by clicking on our kebab icon, moving it over to our stadium sales. And then I'm going to put this over on top. And what I want to do with this is we have these nice KPIs that have been built out here. I want to actually move those up and put them into a visualization and start to build out more of a workbook type feel. So I've moved it over, I've put it up at the top. Oh, and I guess I kind of glossed over, but the way that you can kind of move these objects around is it's all on a snap to grid. And so we can grab our double kebab icon here with the little hand that comes and grab it, and it's really just a drag and drop and pull. And you can grab things and move them around and put them onto the workbook how you want to look at them. So we put this one here at the top. Let's go ahead and create a child visualization off of this. So we'll grab that, do a visualization, and I'm going to just pull. I'm going to move this on the drop-down bar and call it a single value viz. So what we would put a KPI in. And we're going to grab our total revenue and pull it up to the top. I don't need to aggregate this value because it's already been aggregated. So right now what's happening is it's aggregating again for every single one. So I'm going to pull that off, and it's going to give me, here's my total revenue for that piece. And you can see that that number, if we move it up to the top, is going to match what this number looks like right here. So it's going to be the exact same one. It's just there in more of a KPI type format. So to kind of put this around, what I can do is click on the kebab icon again, and I can click to duplicate the element. And so I want to pull in 4 of these at the top. So I'm going to do that just 2 more times. Click the kebab, duplicate element, click, duplicate. And then over here, all I have to do is on my total revenue, I can grab and I can move my total orders up to the top. I can grab and I can move my average order size up to the top. And I can grab and I can grab my units up to the top. And then just the last to kind of round that out, we can pull these up next to each other and make it just nice and pretty to where we can start to build and we have a KPI bar that we can refer to and we can look at. again, kind of move this around, adjust on it. I'm used to doing it with the mouse, not with the drag keyboard. So, one last thing. Here in this table, since we have these up at the top, we don't necessarily need to see this summary. So one of the powerful things here is you can always come in and you can hit this little element format, click on that, go into your table component, and you can get rid of the summary bar on it, and it won't show up. And so you can see where the summary values are. The other thing that we can do is we can only show or not show collapsed columns. So if you look at this, right now we're just seeing it at the product type level, and then we can see it at the product line level. And then if you want to go another level deep, you can open it up on that, and then you can see what the next set of values look like there. So we can kind of reformat that, kind of show what you want your next set of users to kind of look at. In this case, we want to show it both at the product type and product line. Okay, so we've been working on one table so far. Oh, one more thing on this. I do want to add, to just kind of round out some of the dashboard type feel on it. I'm going to click, and I'm going to add a text element, and I'm going to call this Stadium Sales. And sorry, I went kind of quick there, but the way that you add that is this little plus bar here at the top left. You click on the text, and then from there you can add in your piece. I'm going to reformat that to a large heading, and we'll put that just up at the top. Kind of up here. And then we kind of have context for what our workbook is showing us here at this point. You can add pictures, you can add buttons, you can add logos, you can add all of those types of things here in this spot. We'll leave it as this for right now, just in the sake of time. So going back to our base data, we've been looking at just a single table, and we've been looking at stuff on the product line, product type of metrics so far. I want to look at my data based on the team. And so whenever I look within the columns that I have here, if I do a quick search on it and I write team, I see that the only thing that I have is my opponent team key. I don't have anything that can tell me that team 6 is the Chicago White Sox or anything like that. So what I'm going to do on this is I'm going to come in. I know I have one additional table here. So I'm going to click plus on it. I'm going to click table, and I'm going to go to a new table. And on the tables and data sets, I'm going to go back to that sample connection, back to our MLB schema. I'm going to grab this dimension for our MLB teams, so the D MLB teams, and I'm going to pull that in. And you can see what this is it's really just a dimension table. We have our team key here that matches up. We have our league that the teams are in, the division, the teams. I'm going to click done. And so that will pull this in, and it's a separate table from here. If I go all the way in my base data set, and I come over to my opponent team key, I can click on this, and I can do what we call adding a column via lookup. So this is like the equivalent of a VLOOKUP if you're trying to do this in Excel. And what we do on that is it's going to ask me, where do I want to do a lookup to? And I'm going to do it to our data tab, to that D MLB teams table that we put in. And right here, it's going to say, okay, which column? So I'm going to grab my teams key from it. And Sigma's pretty smart. It knows that I'm starting from my team key, and it's going to find that team key column right there. And it's going to say, okay, let's do our join based off of that. We have a 100% match on this. We have none with multiple matches. You can also do this as a roll-up function. So if you go and you find multiple matches, you can do aggregations within this, and you can do more of like a calculation. All we're doing right here is we're trying to translate from a key into a logical business name. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to click done. And what it's going to do is it's going to give me this nice little pill-looking column. And if I click on 6, it's going to pop up and it's going to tell me, okay, that's the American League, it's Central, it's the White Sox, which is what you can see right down here, American League, Central, Chicago White Sox. If I want to add all of those columns right here within that, I can just click the radio button, and it's going to add those columns to my base data set for me. What's happening in the background is it's actually doing a left join for us. It's going and grabbing all of those, but we don't need to know how to do that. We know how to do a VLOOKUP. We can go and we can grab the data that we need in order to continue our analysis. So with that, I now have, based on those team keys, here are the different teams, leagues, and divisions. So I'm just going to do a quick rename, opponent name, opponent division, and opponent league. And rename that. And now that I have this, I want to go ahead and do a little bit of a calculation based off of it. Let's go back and add another visualization. So on our base table, again, we can click there, and we can click to add another table. Nope, we'll do a, sorry about that. We'll click and we'll add a visualization. Most of the standard hotkeys, Control-Z, Control-V, all of those kinds of things will still work within Sigma. So there, I clicked the wrong one, hit Control-Z, it'll still pop up correctly. All we want to do on this is now that we have our opponent data, let's go ahead and build a very quick visualization off of that. I'm going to, here in my x-axis, click the plus, and I'm going to grab my opponent name and put that on the x-axis, and I'm going to grab my revenue and put that on my y-axis. And again, it's going to do a summation. And in this case, I kind of want to know, based on my season ticket holders, who is actually showing up to what game. How are the sales different based on season ticket holders versus not? And so I'm going to grab that season ticket holder flag that we created earlier, pull it up, put it in, and we can kind of see where they're at. Now, what I notice here, we have all of my division rival teams are going to have a lot more sales because this is a summation of what we're looking at. And so one of the things that we can do here is instead of just doing a baseline sum of revenue, we can actually come in here and we can take that and we can adjust in line on what the calculation is that we want to do. So I can take that sum of revenue and divide by a count distinct of my game key. So how many games did we actually play? And that will give us our revenue per game. And so if we look at that, then we'll go down from about 15 million to being looking at, okay, we're looking at more about around like the $2 million range on each of these. I want to filter that, or I'm going to do a sort. I'm going to change that sort to go up and down by that, and we'll rename this to be average sales per game. Now, looking at this, let's move it over just real quick to our other page, just to keep everything kind of together. And we'll come back to our data tab. Looking at that visualization, I can see what our average is, but I might want to be able to see what are the variants per teams. So how am I going to look and how am I going to see different teams, how they, what is their low water mark, what is their high water mark? So what I'm going to show here is actually taking two of the concepts that we've done so far of creating a base table or an aggregate table, and then using that to create a visualization. And so on my base table here, I'm going to go ahead, I'll create a child element. We'll just create a base table on it. And let's call this our opponent sales comparison. I'm going to take this, and we'll go ahead and group by our opponent name. And so another way to get to the grouping is just to grab it from the bottom, pull it up to here. And here we can see all of our opponents. Here's every opponent that we have played. Here's their name. And again, it's the same concept. All of the data that they have there is grouped together. And so I want to pull in what is our game key on that. So what is the individual game that has been played within there? And then we can see, okay, the Arizona Diamondbacks, they played 3 games. We get into like the Angels and we played like 10 games against them. And so you can see for each of these individuals, here is a opponent name, individual game. You can kind of see the types of aggregation, the type of value that we're going to try and pull out of this. And so I'm going to add in a couple of columns very similar to what we were doing before. I'll use the hotkeys on this. I'll do just Shift and plus. And I'm going to grab the game date. But what I want to do on this is I want to just grab the first value for the game date, because it is possible that you might have multiple games on one day. But what I want to see is what is the actual value, what is the individual game day that we're looking at. And I don't really want to see a timestamp here, so I'm just going to come and truncate that down to the day. And then we'll just get the single value there. I've got another couple of columns here in this, and so if you're following along or you're doing this at home afterwards, you can add those ones in as well. But I'm just going to stick to revenue for right now in the sake of time, and I'm just going to do a sum of revenue on this. And we'll call that our game day revenue. And we'll call this our game date. And so there we can see for each of these opponents that we are playing, here was the actual game day revenue that we got for each of those. And you can see how it's grouped together, how it's pulled out. I'm going to take this table that we've built, which is a child table of our original, and I'm going to build a visualization off of this. So I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to build a viz. And in this case, I don't want a bar. I'm going to come into our value options here, and I'm going to grab and build a box and whiskers. And so I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to pull our opponent name up here onto our x-axis, and I'll grab our game day revenue and put it onto our y. We don't need to aggregate that, but that will start to tell us, and I think this looks a little bit better if we display it horizontally. And we'll go back into our element format, and on this, our x-axis here, let's go ahead and grab a min-max because we have kind of a lot of data. It looks like our minimum threshold is at least 1 million. Let's put a minimum of 1 million on this. And then let's look at what this looks like. So you can see, for whatever reason, the Dodgers, I guess we only played them a couple times, there's not a lot of variance whenever the Dodgers come to town. The Texas Rangers, there is quite a large variance, about doubled up on one game versus the other. So what we're looking at here, you might be able to go in if you wanted to go and dig of, what was going on with the Texas Rangers when the game where they only did 1.2 million in revenue. That'd be a good thing. Maybe we look at what the weather looked like. Maybe we pull some of that data and we do a lookup to that, and we'd be able to add those variables to it. I'm going to go ahead and take that, and I'm just going to move that to my stadium sales page. Over on the stadium sales, maybe I'll put those two next to each other because they're pretty relevant for each other, and you can kind of see the way that that is set up for this piece. The last thing that we're going to do here from a visualization standpoint is we're going to create just a pivot table off of our base data. So we'll come and we'll click on our base table. We'll grab that little drop down and we will do a pivot table. Now, whenever I'm talking to my friends about what Sigma can do, the non-technical type folk, the thing that I always explain is if you know how to use Excel, you love pivot tables, and Sigma can do pivot tables on billions of records. So you are able to take that data, you're able to pivot it, you're able to get billions of records all in one go. And we actually have customers that are doing it. I think we have at least one customer that has a pivot table on a 5 billion record data set, and they're able to drill into a multi-level hierarchy and get like their click-through rate data for marketing analytics that they're working on. So on this, we'll just do a real quick view of what we have here. We'll grab our product type one more time, put it up on the rows, grab our stadium, or our stand type, put it up on the rows, and then we'll grab our product line as well and put it up. On the pivot columns, let's grab our stadium level. And you can see how it's starting to build that hierarchy for us. You have a lot of options of how you configure this. There's pivot tables and those types of visualizations. Everybody has their own opinions on how they want to see them. So we give you a lot of configuration options on it. But here, we are able to get down to a certain level. You can see it by the stadium level that we have here. And let's go ahead and just pull up our average revenue, or we'll pull up our revenue here. And we'll do our revenue similar to what we've done before with the count distinct of the game key. And we'll grab what is our average revenue within that. And you can see you can drill on this, you can pull it up, you can go further, you can add totals at different levels, or you can drop them off at various levels as well. We have our stand key on there. Oh, I'm gonna grab my season ticket holder flag as well and pull that up. And then we can look at this by whether or not they are a season ticket holder and what stadium level it is that they're on. I'll grab that, move it over to our page, stadium sales. That'll be the last element that we put onto here. And one last thing to do with this is we want to add a couple of filters. So kind of closing out the canvas here. So I'm going to add 2 different filters on it, coming back to our base table. And I'm going to do our product type, and I'm going to put a filter on this. That's going to be a local filter whenever it first gets created. But I'm going to click on it, our little kebab up here at the top, and click Convert to Page Control. I'll do it the same for our opponent name, and click on that, and put a filter, and Convert to Page Control. And then the only thing left to do on both of these is let's just click on them, and let's move them over to Stadium Sales. And from here, we can grab that, and we can put both of these grab both of those that will kind of get moved over at the bottom. We'll grab both of those and move them up to the top where we're more likely to see filters on most pages. And again, if we want to adjust how we are looking at the data, if we want to do a filter on any of this, well, we can pull this in, move this over. If I want to look at how we are doing against, say, the Dodgers, we had that one game or that information that we were looking at. We want to see what's going on there. We can drill into what those look like. Very quick, very easy. And because we built those filters off of our base table and everything is built off from there, we're able to look at this all. One filter is going to control everything that we have here on the page. At this point, I'm pretty happy with the workbook that I put together. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save As here at the top. We've been doing this just as an exploration. So say we only wanted to do the first part of this and we only wanted to do that and I just wanted to get a quick hit view, like what do my stadium sales look like? You can do a temporal exploration, you do it, you're done, you're out. If you want to save it and you want it to be something that you do in the future, people want to come back to it, we can come over here and we can just save this. We'll call this our MIT Sloan live workshop and save it from there. And what that's going to do is it's going to save it in a folder structure for me. It's going to have it, it's a document that's available. And I can come in here, I can click, and I can either share this via a member, a team, a workspace. I can do link sharing, so I could give a link out that other folks could go and they could come into. But I can share this at the team level, individual level, and be able to have my team come in and look at the data that I've used. If I want to block them from being able to look at the underlying data, I can come over here and I can hide that, click Publish, and whenever we look at what this data would look like in a preview mode of one of those folks, you'll notice here they can't see that data set underneath there. They can just see the tab that I have given them access to. And so depending on what I want them to look at, the way that I want to show this. The last thing that I really want to show here on this piece, and that I think is pretty important, we've built a lot of objects, and we went back to that base table multiple times, right? And so being able to track what happened within that base table, what have we done there, can be very tricky. But we have what's called our Visual Explorer here, where you can track your lineage. This is a very useful tool within this. And you can see where we have our team's information, we have our sales information. You can see where we did that lookup to the data, and you can see what our base table looks like. And so tracing backwards into all the things that we did within this exploration is we went from that base table, and this is one of the reasons why it's kind of important to kind of start with the base and go from there. But where we went from that base table, we built out that group table by product, and we have our KPIs that you can see, all of those single value vises that we built. And then we have our visualization, our bar chart that we built off of it. And then we have the average sales per game with the season ticket holder and that additional thing with the opponent's name on it. And then our opponent group table with our Box and Whiskers that comes off of that. Any one of these, if you click on it and view element, it'll take you to where you are. Whenever building something out that can become complex, it's really easy to trace back the lineage of like, where did this element come from? Where did those data sets come from? What is it that I'm looking at here? And be able to say at the end, this is exactly where it came from and where it went to. This is a very easy way to be able to track, start to finish, what it is that you built. So with that said, I'll come back over here just real quick to our outro. I will say, the other thing, we did build, I did put together this quick presentation within Sigma. This is just the slides that we've moved over. Sigma is not just a data platform, it's a collaboration platform. So you have the ability to pull these things in and be able to visualize, be able to put pictures, be able to share. So this is built just right within Sigma as well. We've got a couple of pictures on this. I'll close with anybody who wants to come and follow along. I know I went pretty fast on a lot of that to make sure that we could kind of get to it. I'm more than happy to answer questions about how we can do that. We do have that free trial. Sign up, you can get 14 free days on it. And you can follow along within the instructions that are there. And then always feel free to reach out to myself, to Kyle, to Georgia, et cetera. We have a booth over on the display hall where you can come and talk to us as well. But we do have about 10 minutes left. So if there are any questions from anybody about how this is set up, about how this works, more than happy to answer those questions right now. Yep. Yeah, so in a lot of cases, if we go into a larger enterprise that it already has a lot of Tableau licenses, will be more additive as a tool. And where Tableau will start to struggle, cross-tab calculations can be very painful, both in Tableau and in Power BI. And at high levels of granularity is whenever somebody gets to a certain point, you have a Tableau dashboard that is highly aggregated to get to the right levels of KPIs and have the right dimensions on it. What we typically see happening is you get to a certain point within that dashboard, and you either have to download data to Excel, or you have to go back to your BI team and say, hey, I need to answer this based off another dimension, or I need you to add in something else to it for me to be able to see it correctly. In that case, instead of downloading to Excel or going back to your business team or to your BI team, you can then just click and go to Sigma, and it can take you to the table where all of that is built off of, and then you can, hey, I can pivot it, and I can look at it the way that I want to. So in a lot of cases with larger companies that have a lot of Tableau dashboards, you have 100 plus Tableau dashboards, you don't want to rip and replace all of those. It doesn't make sense to do that. That's not the right move. We would be additive there. In smaller organizations that are maybe just starting to move to the cloud, they're just starting on that journey in that space. They're putting together a modern data stack after they've been on like a black box solution in the past. We are really good for kicking off that journey and just doing everything within our tool, because you can do the equivalent type. We are not pixel perfect visualizations, but we can do a lot of the same visualizations that you would get out of another tool. Does that help? Yeah. Perfect. Yep.
I have two questions.
Sure.
One, on the Visual Explorer, that's basically a history of all the steps that you created, right?
That's right.
So is it possible to edit that Visual Explorer history?
So I wouldn't necessarily call it a history. I would call it a visual lineage. So this table is built off of this table. And so it's not necessarily like this did happen, it's this is happening. And so whenever you run a query, this query is a reference that's coming back here, and this query is actually a reference that's coming back here. So this is showing you the way that it's all set up. There is a lot that is coming new in the product to be able to work within this. So if you can think of like adding this to a governance tool, or adding it to a catalog, or adding it to a observability tool, we have all of that kind of in the backlog where you can hit an API to pull this out. But you can't edit directly in line right here, right now. Yeah.
And then the second one is related to that, because that was the line I was thinking about there.
Yep.
Can you lock the permissions down?
So you can lock permissions down, not here in the visual editor, but you can lock permissions down within objects and within pages. So you can do like row level security, where you set it up to where you can use like a current user, or current teams, or whatever it is, to where an individual can only see the data that you want them to see. You can do that at the row and column level, and then you can do it at the page level, where you can hide things to where individuals can't see it. And then all of the documents are done, all of our permissions are done from a document level and then from a folder level, very, very similar to like what a Google Docs would be set up as. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Yep.
So, and this might be a question that the answer is really just comes off of Snowflake.
Mm-hmm.
But can you, so if I have like an Excel file and say on a JSON object, can you get that data into Sigma and work with that, as opposed to just having, it seems like it's a sample SQL database we're working off of, right?
Yep, so this is a Snowflake database. Two things. One, you can upload a CSV, and it'll actually write it directly in there. And so you're not reading against the CSV, you're reading against the table that we have loaded. So if you come in and you click on the table element, or if we click new, you can start from a SQL statement if you want. So if you have a SQL statement that you've already written up that you really like, you can do that. If you want to upload a CSV, you can do it directly there. And on your point about like a JSON object, really cool thing that Snowflake allows you to do is variant data types and being able to pull those in. JSON objects are both really nice and also kind of a pain to deal with. If we look at just our season ticket holders, we actually have some information in here. So let me filter out anybody who is not a season ticket holder. And what it's going to show us is here's this JSON object for season ticket holder information. If I click on show value, it'll actually show me everything that is in that JSON object. And this, as you can see, is a multi-level nested JSON. And if we actually click right here, and we hit extract, it'll give us the option to actually just extract that data right out of that JSON object. So if we want, we could grab, okay, what's the age group of this person? Are they, like, what's their birthday day? And then, loyalty tier. And on this, maybe we can change this to a logical and just put it on like that, on a true false. And then click confirm. And very similar to like whenever we did that lookup where it just added the columns for us. It's right there, it's good to go. You can operate on any of those columns just the exact same. So here we can see all of the different birthday days of all of our different members that we're looking at. Yeah. We have probably time for 1 or 2 more questions if there are any more. Happy to answer them. Also happy to stick around and see you all at the booth afterwards. But. Yeah, one more.
I guess you kind of mentioned that companies already work with Tableau. This is more of like an addition.
Mm-hmm.
Would y'all want to have anything, whether it's integration with Tableau, or is the goal that you would like this to be its own service?
We aren't going to build like a native integration, right? Because it is a competitive relationship, but we do have the ability, like, Tableau, whenever you like add a bunch of filters to a workbook, you can then send those filters via link. And so we actually do have the ability, and some of our customers are doing it, where they get to a certain spot on a Tableau dashboard, and they can actually click a button, and it'll say go to Sigma, and it'll grab all of the filters that have been applied to that workbook, or to that dashboard, and then we can open up a Sigma workbook with the same filters already applied, so you start at that same context, but then you have all of the records underneath it rather than being at a high level of aggregation. And you're in a nice cross tab where you can filter, you can do all of those kinds of things together. But we're not going to build a native integration into it. Yeah. Cool. Well, 3 minutes to spare. So thanks everyone for coming. I definitely appreciate it. Thanks for spending the time with us today. And we will see you guys over at the booth.